Okay, so it seems like a question came up at the UU teachings last night because two people sent me the same email from Ken that he sent this morning asking some questions. So I'll read Ken's email, but actually in the email there's about 4 or 5 different questions. So we'll kind of work our way through it, but I'll read it all at once. So he said, when I asked my question this evening, if one can use anger against the suffering and the afflictions rather than the perpetrator, I was thinking of the wrathful deities such as Yamantaka. I am sure that I am misconstruing their frightening demeanor, but it seems that they are striking at death and ignorance with the intent to harm the afflictions which are adventitious to our Buddha nature. So yes, that's true. That's the symbolism with especially Yamantaka, the outer Yamantaka against death, the inner Yamantaka against the afflictions. And so whenever we see the wrathful deities, we should remember they are not wrathful or fierce against people, but against the afflictions. So this is an important point that we find again and again, to separate the person from the afflictions, to separate the person from the person's actions. Okay? Both of those things are different. Yeah, so the afflictions, the wrathful deities are not wrathful towards the person, towards a suffering sentient being. They have compassion for the person, but they are wrathful towards the afflictions because the afflictions are our real enemy. Okay? So we have to be very careful with that. Yeah, and that doesn't mean that if you're practicing Yamantaka, that when you you have a strong affliction, that you then get mad at yourself for having afflictions. Okay, getting mad at the person, whether it's yourself or whether it's the other person, is not the meaning of this. The person is a suffering sentient being, yourself or the other person. Okay? I mean, whenever we get angry at somebody else, we're getting angry at a suffering sentient being. Isn't a suffering sentient being somebody we should have compassion for, not anger? Yeah, so you have to separate the person from their actions and the person from the afflictions that are causing their actions. Okay? So the wrathful deities are having this energy that say, just kind of, cut it out. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I find that energy very, very helpful, And in fact, I used it just a day or two ago. I was getting upset about, I can't even remember now. You know how it is? You get upset, and then a few days later, you can't even remember what you were upset about. But it was so important when you were angry. The whole existence of the earth depended on it when you were angry. And 2 days later, you can't remember what it is. So I can't remember what I was mad about. But I remember my mind was churning about something. And then I just had to look at my mind and say, stop. This is all just conceptual garbage. I've been through this, I've looked at it many times. I've seen how I've exaggerated things many times. And I just have to stop now. And that worked. Now, I must say, years ago, that method would not have worked, and it would have resulted in repressing the anger. Why? Because years ago, I had not done sufficient analysis to really understand how my anger works. And so for me, it was always very necessary to really understand how my anger works. Because anger is based on a story. The other person does not make us angry. We are making up a story in our own mind. We are interpreting the situation in a certain way. Okay? So our garbage mind makes us angry. Somebody else never makes us angry. Somebody else is a suffering sentient being. Yeah? So all they are, a suffering sentient being. So our mind is making up some story, thinking that our story is reality, being attached to our story. And of course, what is our story? Our story is always, it's somebody else's fault. Our story is always blame. It's somebody else who unjustly did this to me. Isn't that? Now, when you're embedded in your story, then you're going to look at me and say, she's crazy. She doesn't understand what really happened. My anger is justified. My anger is correct because this person really did do something awful. And you know what? The whole world agrees. So I'm right and my anger is right. Well, good luck. Okay, don't listen to this BBC. But if you wanted to practice the Dharma, consider, that there's an alternative to your own entrenched interpretation, that there's a difference between interpretation and reality. Big difference, okay? So when we're stuck in our interpretation, in our story, we have to identify it as just that. It is not reality. Yeah. Then, if we have a really good understanding of that, and we've practiced thought training, and we can see many, many other ways to look at the situation, and when we look at the situation in those other ways, then there's no anger. So there's no repression of anger. When you've done that enough so that you're really familiar with when your anger comes up, this is the same old stuff. Then you can turn like a wrathful deity and say to your garbage mind, shut up. You know? And then you put it down. Yeah. But you have to have all that understanding beforehand. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're repressing the anger or you're blaming yourself for being angry. And so repressing the anger you have for somebody else doesn't help. Being angry at yourself also doesn't help. Okay? And both of those are also false. Okay, I think the word blame should be abolished, actually. So these wrathful deities are, they're saying, like when our mind gets really greedy, really attached, I want this, I need this, I have to have this. You know that baby mind? Yeah. Maybe you don't know it. I have a baby mind. I want this, I have to have that. Why can't I have it? They have it. It's unfair. Yeah. Then, when I can see that mind, and sometimes I even anthropomorphize it. There's one practice where you make offerings to different demons. So this is, one of that whiny mind. I have she looks a certain way. And, I anthropomorphize it. But anyway, the idea is you look and you just say, I know you're a trip. Shut up. Yeah? It's like, we've been through this 10,000 times. I'm not listening to you. Okay. Then his email continues. Venerable children often, actually the Buddha often says, not me, the Buddha often says, not often, always says, our true enemies are our self-centeredness and our self-grasping ignorance. If I have aversion to and a wish to harm these root afflictions, is there not an element of anger built into that? Or should I only view these with compassion, wishing to free myself and others? Okay, even my renunciation of cyclic existence is an aversion or ill will or wish to escape the suffering of this world. Isn't this a form of anger towards samsara? So I may have fallen into some wrong views. Please help. Okay. So yes, our true enemies, self-centeredness, self-grasping ignorance. Now, if I have aversion to and a wish to harm these root afflictions, isn't there an element of anger built into that? No. Okay, so last week we had a BBC and we were talking about how I was using the word anger as an umbrella word for all these mental states that have the same quality of exaggeration or projection of qualities, and then then wanting to fight it or flee from it. Okay? And then somebody proposed using the word aversion as that blanket general thing. I don't use aversion for that because we should have aversion for samsara. Yeah? Why? Now, okay, why I don't use aversion? In the definition of anger, remember, it's based on exaggerating and projecting things that are not there. When you have aversion to samsara, you are not exaggerating or projecting anything. For the first time in your life, you're seeing reality, conventional reality as it is, that samsara stinks. Okay? Having aversion to samsara is the basis for renunciation. If we don't have aversion to samsara, like right now, most of us, I don't know about you, I don't have aversion to samsara. I just want to tweak my samsara and make it better. Yeah, if I don't have aversion to samsara, I'm never going to get out. A prisoner who's stuck in prison who doesn't have aversion to the prison is not going to want to get out. Okay, so aversion to something that actually is detrimental and harmful. Yeah, that is not exaggerating and projecting qualities that aren't there. When we're angry at another person, we are exaggerating and projecting qualities that aren't there. Why or how? Because we're hearing what some suffering sentient being is saying as a personal attack. It is not a personal attack. It's a suffering sentient being saying, I'm unhappy. Or in NVC language, it's a suffering sentient being saying, I have unfulfilled needs. Yeah. When we hear it as blame, when we hear it as threatening, that is our interpretation. Even if the other person has the intention to harm us, that doesn't matter. Their intention is their business. We're the one who has jackal ears and hears blame and hears threat. Mm-hmm. So, looking at that self-centered mind, looking at that self-grasping ignorance, looking at that anger, that are all minds that are exaggerating and projecting things that aren't there. Yeah, having aversion to those kind of minds, that's good. That means we want to be free of them. We want out. Who wants to remain self-centered forever? Yeah. Now, okay, we're self-centered. We grasp it at a truly existent I. We can get a lot of ego mileage from that. Because what do those two minds do? When we're in conflict with somebody, I am right. I'm right. Why? Because I'm me. That's the only reason. Of course, the other person's saying that too, which is why they're wrong and I'm right. Because my views are only right ones. I never hold wrong ones. And everything I say should be enacted immediately. I should win every argument. Why? Because I'm a winner. I am not a loser. Who wants to be a loser? Other people are losers. I'm a winner. I'm going to win every argument. Doesn't matter if I'm wrong. I'm going to win the argument anyway. Have you ever been in an argument and you know you're wrong and you keep arguing? Have you ever done that? I've done that. It's like, Chudran, shut up. You're wrong. But you don't understand. My view is the right one because blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Well, the only reason is because it's mine. It's not a very good reason. Okay? So the whole idea is when we're under the influence of afflictions and self-centeredness, we are not seeing reality. So every time we get angry, we get jealous, we get judgmental, we get full of attachment and desire and craving, every time, whenever we're arrogant, we have to look at that mind and say, I am not perceiving reality. Let alone the ultimate reality of emptiness. I'm not even seeing the conventional reality. Yeah? I am living in my own fantasy hallucination mind. Yeah? And we have to get used to recognizing that mind and identifying it. That's the mind of mistaken appearances. Yeah? Really carried to the nth degree, where, I'm here and the world owes me something. And it's not giving me what I deserve. I should always be comfortable. I am always right. I always should win every argument. I should always get my way. Yeah? What logical reason is there to support that? Make a syllogism that supports that. Yeah? The syllogism is I am right, and the reason is because I'm me. Yeah? I am right because I only do things that are right. Good for you. You must be Buddha. Okay? So there's a few different points here. Yeah? So to recognize when we have affliction, our mind is not seeing reality, and to stop the story and do some analysis and really see how our story is erroneous. Yeah? How my story is erroneous. That person is talking about themselves. If I deliberately set them off, because I know how to poke at them and get something, that is my business and my responsibility, and I have to correct that. But don't put on jackal ears and hear blame where there isn't any. Even if that person wants to blame you, you don't have to hear blame, because that person is some suffering sentient being that doesn't know, they're involved in their own story, just like we're involved in ours. So that's one thing. Second thing is, I'm not using aversion as that blanket thing. So aversion is not involved with exaggeration and projection, and we should have aversion for samsara. Yeah. This is related kind of to your question about can we crave the Dharma? And again, it's because we're not understanding the definition of craving and attachment, that involves exaggeration and projection. Whereas the Dharma has all these good qualities. You're not projecting something, being attached to it. Yeah. If you're creating an identity about being a Buddhist, I'm a Buddhist, therefore I believe what's right and I have the best religion and that is not being attached to the Dharma. That's our own ego attachment to, I want to present myself as the best. Yeah, and we're just using the Dharma as an excuse. It has nothing to do with the Dharma. Okay? So we don't get mad at samsara, but we do have aversion to samsara. Okay? We don't crave liberation, but we do desire in the virtuous kind of desire, meaning aspiration, a virtuous aspiration. We do have a virtuous aspiration for liberation. Okay? Did I answer everything? Yeah. Okay? So where does compassion come in? We have compassion for the other person who's a suffering sentient being. If I'm overwhelmed by my own afflictions, I have kindness and compassion for myself because my afflictions are making me suffer. I do not have compassion for the afflictions. I do not go, oh, dear anger, somebody's blaming you, telling you you shouldn't exist. Dear anger, you're actually very precious. No, we do not have compassion for our afflictions. We have compassion for ourselves when we are blinded and overwhelmed by afflictions. We have compassion for other people who are blinded and overwhelmed by their afflictions. Yeah, but we don't coddle our afflictions. Yeah. Oh, dear affliction, dear anger, you really are right. That person really is wrong. But they don't understand. But I believe in you, anger, and one day you will be victorious. No, that is not going to help us. Okay? Okay.